My son humiliated me on Christmas. He pulled up in a BMW with a big red bow parked right in front of the house, called everyone over to see it, handed the keys to his mother-in-law, and to me, he held out 3 crumpled dollars, folded up like he was tossing me spare change. Smiling, he said, "It's symbolic, Mom." I understood immediately. It wasn't a joke. It was a message. The living room froze. Eyes flicked from the car to me. No one said a word. The comparison did the dirty work all by itself. My stomach dropped before I even unfolded the paper. I wasn't being given money. I was being handed my place. His mother-in-law smiled like someone reclaiming old territory. She started talking about deserving it, about gratitude, about hard work. That red bow gleamed like a taunt. My son laughed, proud of his own generosity with her. With me, affection came with a discount. I stood there, whole on the outside, hollow on the inside. I remembered years of backing his choices, paying bills, catching him when he fell. I remembered how help turns into obligation when it's always the same person giving. That night, everything became clear all at once. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't correct anyone. I swallowed the knot and watched. Because when someone does that to you in public, they don't want a conversation. They want hierarchy. That's when I realized gifts can wound too, and money can be used like a blade. When humiliation comes wrapped in celebration, it cuts deeper. That's where my story changed. If you've ever felt that quiet cut, stay with me. Leave a like, subscribe, and share. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching this story from? He didn't show even a hint of embarrassment. That detail hit me harder than the amount. My son held out the folded bills like he was offering a napkin or a piece of candy. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't pull me aside. Loud enough for everyone to hear, smiling, he said, "It's symbolic, Mom." Then he laughed, expecting me to laugh along. The bills were wrinkled, warm from his hand. $3 folded carefully enough not to fall, but with no care at all for what it meant. I took them slowly. My hands didn't shake. My face didn't change. On the outside, I was untouched. On the inside, something gave way. There was no awkward pause. No one tried to fix it. The conversation kept going as if it were normal, as if that gesture meant nothing more than a harmless joke. That was the second blow, realizing he truly believed I would accept it. Someone commented on the car. Someone else praised what he'd done for his mother-in-law. The contrast settled in without effort. I stood there holding the folded bills while the room reorganized itself around his pride. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was a choice. I looked at my son, trying to find even a flicker of hesitation. I found none. He was comfortable, confident, convinced I'd do what I'd always done, swallow it, smile, and keep serving. I folded the bills with unnecessary care and slipped them into my coat pocket. Not out of politeness, out of memory. I needed to remember that moment exactly. The tone, the smile, the complete absence of care. Because it hadn't been a mistake. It was a message delivered clearly. I felt heat rise in my face, but not from anger. Chalk clarity. The shame wasn't mine. It never was. But in that moment, something that took years to sharpen finally came into focus. He believed I had no limit. And when someone believes that, the next humiliation is only a matter of time. Dinner kept going. I barely participated. Every word felt unnecessary. Something had broken there, in silence. Not the bond, the illusion. I didn't need to respond that night. I only needed not to forget. Because gestures like that don't ask for an immediate conversation. They ask for a considered consequence. And for the first time, I wasn't going to pretend I hadn't understood. After the gift moment, the room's temperature shifted. Nothing was declared. It was felt. Conversations lost their rhythm for a few seconds, as if everyone sensed the weight of the comparison but no one wanted to be the first to touch it. Someone commented on the shine of the car parked outside. Another praised the color, the bow, the surprise. My son explained details enthusiastically, like he was presenting a trophy. His mother-in-law listened with the posture of someone who had just been officially promoted. Her gaze moved around the room, steady, satisfied. I stayed seated, hands resting on my lap. I caught a few quick glances in my direction, not curious, evaluative, as if people were checking whether I was reacting the right way, the way that made things easier for everyone. A cousin looked away when our eyes met. A neighbor cleared her throat and changed the subject too quickly. Small gestures. Small confirmations. No one said anything, but no one needed to. The comparison had been made. That's when I realized I hadn't been forgotten. I had been positioned. That was the difference. If it were an oversight, someone would have corrected it. If it were a mistake, someone would have looked embarrassed. But everything moved on, smooth, organized, as if that really was the place I occupied. My chest tightened, not from surprise, but from late recognition. How many other times had I been pushed to the background the same way? No announcement, no confrontation, just a quiet clarification of who mattered more in that moment. My son didn't look at me once after that, not to check if I was okay, not to soften anything. He stayed comfortable in his choice. That hurt more than any comment could have. Conscious indifference weighs more than direct aggression. The conversation went on, but I was no longer part of it in the same way. Every laugh sounded distant. Every remark felt out of place. I was there physically, but something in me had stepped back, not out of drama, out of clarity. In that moment, I understood something fundamental. Humiliation can happen through contrast. You don't have to put someone down directly. It's enough to elevate someone else strategically, enough to make it clear who deserves applause and who should be grateful in silence. While everyone talked, I did something new. I stopped trying to justify. I stopped looking for explanations that would soften his behavior. The scene didn't need interpretation. It explained itself. There, in that room, I stopped being naive. Not because someone attacked me, but because no one defended me. Not even the person I raised. And when the truth shows itself without disguise, there's no going back to pretending you didn't see it. She didn't just receive a car. She received authority. The moment the keys were handed over, her posture changed. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and started speaking louder, as if she'd been officially appointed to a new role. She didn't thank just my son. She thanked the entire room waiting for confirmation. My son watched with satisfaction. He stepped in whenever someone commented, reinforcing her narrative. "She deserves it," he said with conviction. Every repetition of the words sounded like a stamp. I listened from my seat with a clear sense that I was outside the decision and outside the story they were telling. She began offering opinions about dinner, about schedules, about what should happen next. Small commands disguised as suggestions. No one questioned her. The gift had authorized her voice. The red bow was still visible through the window, calling attention to itself like a permanent reminder. It was as if the car were parked inside the living room, taking up symbolic space. Every time someone complimented it, she smiled wider. Every time she smiled, she grew. At one point, laughing, she said, "It's about time someone recognized who's always been there." She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. The sentence crossed the room on its own. I watched everything in silence. Not out of fragility, out of clarity. This wasn't a passing moment of vanity. It was an alliance being sealed in public. My son had chosen whom to elevate and whom he could diminish without consequence. I felt a brief tightness in my chest, but I didn't let it pass. I stored the entire scene away. The tone, the gestures, the way no one interrupted, because it explained far more than any private conversation ever could. When dinner ended, she stood up like someone closing her own event. She hugged my son with pride. She passed by me without looking. The house felt smaller after she left, not because of physical space, but because of the message that lingered. She left bigger than she arrived. I stayed seated, smaller, yes, but finally awake. That night, I understood something I'd never wanted to name. Some gifts aren't about affection, they're about power. And when power changes hands, everything around it reorganizes, including the one who's always been left for later. When the room started to empty out, I stayed seated for a few minutes by myself. Chairs out of place, plates still on the table, the smell of food mixed with my daughter-in-law's strong perfume. It was in that silence that the memories came, not as drama, as accounting. I remembered the first time I helped my son financially after he was already an adult. He promised he'd pay it back. He never did. Then came the others. Rent covered, just for a few months. A credit card loaned. Bills paid without warning. Always with the idea that it was temporary. Always with the certainty that I would figure it out. I never charged him, never threw it in his face. I called it being a mother. Only later did I realize the real name for it, constant self-erasure. As I stacked plates by the sink, I remembered the trips I postponed, the clothes I didn't buy, the plans I delayed with the automatic phrase, "It's not a priority right now." The priority was always him, always supporting choices that weren't mine. That night, something became impossible to ignore. Everything I had done over the years didn't enter that room as context. It didn't become part of the story. It didn't turn into recognition. Because when someone always gives, they stop being remembered. They become background. The folded paper with the $3 was still in my coat pocket. I touched it lightly, just to confirm I hadn't imagined it. It didn't erase the past, but it explained the present. It showed, with brutal clarity, how my sacrifices had been reclassified as obligation. I felt a deep exhaustion, not physical, moral. The kind of fatigue that comes when you realize you've been sustaining an unfair dynamic for far too long. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I felt late clarity. I stopped at the sink, hands wet, and thought, I taught this without meaning to. I thought that I was always available. I thought that I had no limit. I thought that my effort didn't need to be acknowledged. That realization hurt more than the gift, because it didn't place responsibility only on him. It placed it on me too, and responsibility doesn't allow escape. That night I understood something simple and difficult. Sacrifice without recognition isn't virtue. It's erasure. And continuing to accept that didn't make me better, just more convenient. If I wanted anything to change from that point on, it wouldn't be through speeches. It would be through structure, through decisions, through real consequences, because memory without action turns into nothing but lament, and I was no longer willing to mourn in silence. In the days after Christmas, I started watching my son more closely. Not as a worried mother, but as someone who had finally stopped filling in the gaps for him. Every gesture said more than any conversation we'd had over the years. I noticed the excessive care with his mother-in-law, frequent calls, messages answered immediately, a tone that was always warm, always available. He made an effort to be seen as attentive, as someone who values others. It was almost automatic. With me, it was different. Replies were short, topics were practical. He spoke to me like someone speaks to a sure thing, someone who doesn't need to be pleased. The difference wasn't subtle. I had just learned to normalize it. At a lunch a few days later, he commented, without apparent malice, that he needed to balance things out now that he had bigger responsibilities. He said it while looking at his phone, not at me. The sentence passed quickly, but it stayed. He was explaining a choice he'd already made. That's when I realized he wasn't trying to hurt me. He was trying to align himself with status, with what he believed would elevate him socially. His mother-in-law wasn't just family. She was a symbol, and symbols require investment. The pain came clean in that moment. It wasn't impulsive abandonment. It was conscious repositioning. He believed I would always be there, regardless of the place he gave me. And that belief freed him to prioritize other bonds. That realization changed everything. Because while I thought it was carelessness, I waited for correction. When I understood it was a choice, I stopped waiting. I stopped justifying. I stopped softening. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions. I simply watched how he moved through the world now that he believed all his bases were covered. That security came from me, and he didn't seem to realize it. One thing became clear. Misplaced loyalty is costly, not immediately but over time. When someone invests everything where there's applause and forgets who sustains them, they create an imbalance that can't last forever. I still hadn't taken any concrete action, no outward move, but something inside me had shifted its axis. I no longer saw myself as unconditional support. I saw myself as someone who needed to be considered. And when that perception changes, everything else becomes consequence. The comment came when no one was expecting anything anymore. We were all tired, plates nearly empty, conversations scattered. My son laughed and said, loud enough to carry across the table, "She doesn't care about that." He nodded towards me as if introducing me. The laughter came too quickly. It wasn't a full laugh. It was short, polite chuckles, the kind people use to close an uncomfortable moment without having to deal with it. I felt heat rise in my face, but I kept my expression neutral. Not because I agreed, but because I knew any reaction from me would become the focus of the scene, not his gesture. A sister-in-law looked away. A cousin checked his phone. Someone cleared their throat and changed the subject. Small signs of discomfort no one wanted to hold. The joke did its job. It normalized the humiliation and released everyone from the responsibility to respond. My son kept talking, as if he'd done something kind. "She's always been simple," he added, still smiling. The word hung in the air, heavy. Simple didn't mean modest. It meant undemanding, easy to deal with, easy to overlook. I stayed seated, hands resting on the table. I felt my fingers go cold, my chest tighten. This wasn't overreaction. It was my body registering a boundary being crossed in public. That wasn't carelessness. It was being far too comfortable diminishing me. I looked at him, searching for any sign of delayed regret. There was none. He was calm, certain that this version of me, the mother who doesn't mind, who understands everything, would be accepted by everyone, including me. That was the moment something broke for good, not the bond, my tolerance. I realized that joke wouldn't be forgotten the next day, because someone who laughs at their own mother in public isn't being spontaneous. They're testing how far they can go. I didn't respond. I didn't correct him. I didn't make a speech. I simply observed the silence that followed the laughter, brief but loaded. The conversation resumed, but something had shifted. I felt it. They did too. When I stood up from the table, no one tried to stop me. No one asked if I was okay. That confirmed everything. The scene was complete. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to patch it up. Alone in the bedroom, I took a deep breath. The phrase echoed, "She doesn't care." I did care. But caring in that moment meant not reacting there. It meant storing the entire scene as evidence. Some humiliations don't call for an immediate response. They call for consequence. And that night had just shown me exactly where it needed to happen. When the house finally went quiet, I sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the light, still dressed, still hearing the distant sounds of doors closing and cars pulling away. It was there, in the dark, that I stopped trying to minimize what had happened. I replayed the entire scene, slowly, the car arriving, the red bow drawing attention before any person did, the keys handed over like a trophy, the satisfied smile on my daughter-in-law's face, my son's sentence. the folded paper in my hand. Everything had been too clear to be accidental. It wasn't about money. It was about place, about who he wanted to impress, about who he believed he could treat as a guarantee. That clarity didn't come as an explosion. It came as alignment, like an old truth finally finding words. I wasn't being overly sensitive. I wasn't misreading it. The gesture had been thought through, executed, sustained in public. I felt a deep exhaustion, not the kind that asks for rest, but the kind that demands change. The kind that comes when you realize you've been insisting on a dynamic that hasn't respected you for a long time. I looked at my hands and remembered how many times they'd held difficult situations together for him. How many times they'd been extended without return. That night they held $3. But for the first time, they didn't hold the excuse. That's when I understood. My son wasn't testing me. He was informing me of the role he believed I played in his life. And that information required a response, not emotional, but structural. I didn't feel like arguing or calling the next day or explaining how much it had hurt. What I felt was firmer than that. Decision. When pain turns into decision, it changes nature. It stops being an open wound and becomes direction. I lay down without letting the image of the red bow leave my mind. Not as obsession, as reference. That had been the marker, the exact point where I stopped pretending I didn't see. From then on, continuing that dynamic would be my choice. That night I slept little, but I woke up different. Doubt was no longer with me. The scene didn't need reinterpretation. It was clear. And clarity doesn't ask for urgency. It asks for precision. I still didn't know exactly what I would do. But I knew what I wouldn't do anymore. I wouldn't explain myself. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't accept being placed last with a smile on my face. Some gestures close entire chapters. That one had closed mine. And from that point on, whatever came next would be consequence. That night I did exactly what my son didn't expect. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for explanations. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a pointed comment. I simply stood up from the table when the conversation started looping and went to the bedroom in silence. I closed the door gently, as if I didn't want to announce anything. I sat on the edge of the bed, still dressed, feeling my heart beat faster than I wanted it to. The noise of the house continued on the other side. Lower laughter. Dishes being gathered, doors opening and closing. Life went on normally without me, and that confirmed something important. No one came after me. No one knocked to ask if I was okay. The discomfort they had caused wasn't a priority. I lay down without turning off the light, staring at the ceiling, feeling my body react with delay. Cold hands, shallow breathing, a heavy stomach. It wasn't held back crying. It was the physical impact of swallowing something too big in public. I took a few deep breaths until my body caught up with my mind. I thought about how that scene might have ended if I had reacted, if I had complained, if I had questioned him. I already knew that script. It would become my exaggeration, my oversensitivity, my lack of humor, everything except his responsibility. That's when I understood why I needed to stay silent. Not as submission, but as strategy. I wasn't going to give him the chance to turn humiliation into my drama. Not that night. I took my coat and pulled the folded paper with the $3 out of the pocket. I opened it slowly, checked it. I didn't need to, but I needed to see it. I folded it again with exaggerated care and placed it on the nightstand. That wasn't money, it was evidence. The silence in that room wasn't empty. It was dense. I felt my thoughts organizing themselves without effort. For the first time, there was no confusion, no automatic attempt to understand his side. There was only the scene, exactly as it had been. I turned off the light later. I didn't fall asleep right away. But I didn't panic either. Something inside me had closed, definitively. It wasn't my heart. It was my tolerance. As the house finally fell asleep, I knew. That night wouldn't end there. Not with a conversation the next day. Not with an apology. It would end with consequence. Still invisible, still shapeless, but inevitable. I hadn't argued, but I had decided. And decisions made in silence are usually the firmest ones. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. The house was still quiet. I made coffee in the dark and sat alone at the table, the warm mug between my hands. There was no rush, no noise, just space to think. That's when the thought arrived, whole, without drama, without internal debate. If I'm treated like nothing. The sentence hung in the air for a few seconds. Then it continued, firm, unavoidable. I can't leave everything the way it is. It wasn't revolt. It was lucidity. For the first time, I didn't think about how my son would feel if something changed. I thought about how I would feel if nothing changed. And the answer was immediate. I would keep shrinking myself to sustain a comfortable lie. I looked around the kitchen, the table I bought, the cabinets paid for with my money. The house built through years of work and renunciation. Everything there carried my history, except respect. That didn't add up. I thought about what I was leaving behind. Not just assets, but a message. What was I teaching by accepting humiliation without consequence? That love tolerates anything? That a mother has no limits? That disrespect costs nothing? That idea unsettled me more than the gift. I stood up and went to the bedroom. I opened the drawer where I kept important documents. I didn't look for anything specific yet. I just confirmed that I knew where everything was. That simple gesture brought a new feeling, control over myself. I thought about how many important decisions I'd postponed out of fear of seeming harsh, fear of creating distance, fear of losing the little affection I still received. That morning, it became clear that fear no longer made sense. I was already paying too high a price. The thought returned, now without doubt. I can't leave everything the way it is. This wasn't revenge. It was responsibility. Responsibility to my history, to my legacy, to the woman I had become after so many years of yielding. Late boundaries still save. They save what's left of dignity when everything else has already been tested. I finished my coffee slowly, washed the mug, set it on the rack. Ordinary gestures, but heavy with decision. Life went on as usual on the outside. Inside, everything had shifted. I still didn't know exactly what I would do, but I knew I wouldn't do anything impulsive. It would be a quiet, adult, definitive move. No announcements, no speeches, no audience. In that moment, I understood something I had never taken seriously. When someone who has always been the guarantee decides to change, noise isn't required. Structure is. Christmas was over. Its consequence wasn't, and it would begin in the only place it could, within me. 2 days after Christmas, I left the house early. I didn't leave a note. I didn't tell anyone. I took the brown folder where I've always kept important documents and placed it carefully in my bag. There was no rush. There was decision. The notary's office was just a few blocks away. I'd walked through that door dozens of times over my life, always to handle practical matters. That morning I pushed it open knowing exactly what I needed to do. The space was simple, people waiting. No visible urgency. No one there knew my story. That gave me peace. I sat and waited to be called. While I waited, I opened the old will. I read every line carefully, not like someone reviewing numbers, but like someone revisiting choices. The woman who had signed that document believed unconditional love meant never setting limits. I respected that version of myself, but I was no longer her. When my name was called, I stood without hesitation. I explained clearly what I wanted to change. No drama, no emotional details. I spoke of redistribution, of coherence, of adjustment. My voice was steady, without tremor. My body matched the decision. As the clerk typed, my mind went back to the Christmas scene. The BMW with the red bow. The folded paper was $3. That memory no longer came as pain. It came as reference, a clear marker of when something broke. It wasn't punishment, it was consequence. I signed calmly, reviewed everything with care. When I handed the papers back, I felt something rare, alignment, not immediate relief, internal alignment, the feeling of finally acting in accordance with something I'd known for a long time. When I stepped outside the notary's office, I paused on the sidewalk for a moment. The air was cold. I took a deep breath. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel euphoria. I felt stability. The decision was made, documented, protected. There was no comfortable way back, and I didn't need one. I walked home slowly, made lunch, washed the dishes, put the folder back where it had always been. On the outside, the day unfolded normally. On the inside, something had been definitively reorganized. I didn't tell anyone. Not out of fear, out of maturity. Some decisions don't need to be shared to be real. They only need to be sustained. That day, I understood something important. Justice isn't shouting. Justice is stopping the reward of disrespect. It's protecting your own legacy without asking permission, and I had just done that. After the visit to the notary, nothing in me wanted confrontation. I didn't want to announce anything or use the decision as a future threat. What I'd done wasn't a weapon. It was structure, something that holds without needing explanation. I went back to my routine carefully. I answered calls, replied to messages, bought small groceries, made simple meals. On the outside, everything looked the same. On the inside, the constant tension of knowing something was wrong and pretending not to see it was gone. I thought a lot about the decision in the days that followed, not to undo it, but to conform it. I hadn't excluded anyone out of anger. I had simply stopped prioritizing someone who had placed me last so effortlessly. Redistributing isn't punishment. It's aligning values with reality. I also thought about my son's mother-in-law, the satisfied smile, the speech about deserving it. That lost its power quickly. She no longer had space inside me. Symbolic power only works when it finds emotional ground. I had closed that access. There was a brief moment of doubt. That old question, was I too harsh? It appeared and disappeared just as fast. Too harsh for someone who handed me $3 in public. For someone who laughed at my humiliation? No. Harsh is continuing to call disrespect love. What surprised me most was the lightness that slowly settled in. Not exaggerated happiness, lightness. My body relaxed, my sleep improved, food tasted good again. When you stop carrying what's unjust, the body is the first to say thank you. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done, not even my daughter, who had always watched everything with quiet attention. It wasn't secrecy out of fear, it was restraint. Some decisions need time to root before being shared. I noticed, too, that I no longer expected an apology, or recognition, or understanding. That had stopped being necessary. The validation I needed was coming from inside, and it was enough. I kept thinking about legacy, not just material legacy, but the message. What would I leave as an example? That a mother endures everything? Or that dignity has no expiration date? I chose the second. This change didn't involve theatrical exclusion or harsh speeches. It involved coherence. It involved stopping the reward of behavior that hurt me. It involved choosing myself without guilt. In that phase, I understood something essential. Mature justice doesn't make noise. It settles in. It sustains itself. And it changes everything without needing to announce a thing. I knew the next stage would require steadiness, not emotion. Steadiness. What I'd done needed to hold over time, and I was ready for that. Because when you're aligned on the inside, There's no need to rush. Time starts working in your favor. I thought guilt would come afterward, that I'd wake up regretful, that the weight of the decision would fall on me like a delayed punishment. None of that happened. What came was silence. A different kind of silence from the one that used to suffocate me. A clean, organized silence. For the first time in a long while, I was breathing without anticipating conflict. My body understood before my mind did. Something had been corrected. In the days that followed, I started noticing small but steady changes. I slept through the night. I ate without that tight feeling in my stomach. I moved through the house without the sense that I was occupying a provisional place. Nothing outside had changed, and yet everything felt different. I didn't need to convince myself of anything anymore. The decision stood on its own. Every time I thought about Christmas, the scene, the red bow, the 3 folded dollars, I didn't feel anger. I felt coherence. That had been the necessary breaking point. I began looking at my own history with more honesty. I saw the woman who had sustained, protected, and yielded too much, not with judgment, but with late recognition. I did the best I could with the tools I had. Now I had different ones. One day my son called. The conversation was ordinary. He talked about work, schedules, everyday things. I listened attentively and answered politely. When I hung up, something surprised me. I wasn't tense. There was no fear of saying the wrong thing, no need to please. That's when I realized the axis had shifted. I was no longer reacting to his behavior. I had reorganized the foundation. When the foundation changes, everything else loses leverage. He didn't know it yet. He might not even suspect it. But the control he thought he had over me no longer existed. In the days that followed, I felt something I'd never felt so clearly: respect for myself. Not the kind that depends on someone else's approval, but the kind that's born when you stop betraying yourself to keep fragile bonds alive. I thought a lot about justice. I'd always associated justice with confrontation, with argument, with visible pain. In that phase, I learned something new. Justice can also be quiet. It can happen in an ordinary notary's office on a cold morning without an audience. The biggest consequence of that decision wasn't financial, it was emotional. I no longer needed to shrink myself. I no longer had to laugh at jokes that diminished me. I no longer had to accept crumbs to preserve the illusion of closeness. What struck me most was realizing I didn't need him to understand. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need validation. I had done what needed to be done, and that was enough. One afternoon, I sat alone in the living room and watched the light come in through the window. A simple gesture, but filled with something new. Presence. I was there, whole. Not as a useful mother, not as emotional collateral, as a woman. That Christmas, I lost something comfortable, the illusion that love tolerates everything. But I gained something far greater, dignity. And dignity changes how you live, how you choose, how you stand. I didn't need to humiliate anyone. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to explain. Justice had been done in the only place that truly matters, inside me. And when that happens, there's no going back to the old place. I had crossed the point of no return. And for the first time, that didn't scare me. After the decision, life didn't turn upside down. And that was the most surprising part. There were no desperate phone calls, no delayed arguments, no demands for explanations. What happened instead was a quiet adjustment, almost imperceptible to anyone looking from the outside. I knew that at some point my son would find out, maybe by reading a document, maybe hearing it from someone else, maybe too late for any kind of correction. But that expectation no longer consumed me. For the first time, I wasn't living ahead of other people's reactions. That freedom was new. I'd spent years organizing my choices around other people's moods, measuring words, predicting conflicts. After the notary, I stopped rehearsing imaginary conversations. I didn't need to explain anything anymore. What was done didn't depend on approval. I began to notice small changes in daily life. I spoke less, justified less. When something didn't sit right with me, I simply didn't engage. No irony, no defensiveness. I stepped back, and that changed everything. I also noticed my son watching me more closely. Not overtly, something subtle, a new attentiveness, maybe intuition, maybe discomfort. When a dynamic shifts on one side, the other feels it, even without knowing why. I didn't take pleasure in that. I didn't imagine the future shock with satisfaction. That would have pulled me back into the old position, reacting to him. What I felt now was healthy distance. The ability to stay emotionally uninvolved in something that no longer depended on me. I started thinking more about my own future, how I wanted to live the next years, who I wanted to share my days with, what kind of calm I wanted to cultivate. The focus shifted from repair to continuity. There was a moment when I thought, maybe he'll never fully understand, and that was fine. Understanding isn't a requirement for consequence. Some lessons don't come through conversation. They come through silence and time. I kept organizing my days. Papers in order, simple routines, small commitments, chosen by me. Nothing grand, just choices that respected my limits. For the first time, I wasn't waiting on anyone else's behavior to decide my own. His shock would come when it needed to, without my presence, without my face as a target, without my energy being drained to support reactions. That wasn't coldness. It was late maturity. With a new calm, I understood something clearly. Some answers don't need to be witnessed to be complete. They happen in their own time, off stage, when no one is pretending anymore. I didn't need to be there to watch. I had already done what needed to be done, and that finally was enough. In the end, it wasn't about the BMW, and it wasn't about the $3. It was about clarity. The real gift of that Christmas didn't come wrapped. It arrived the moment I stopped pretending everything was fine, when I stopped accepting less to preserve a peace that had always cost me too much. Seeing that hurt, but for the first time, it hurt in the right way. Like something waking up, not something breaking me down. After everything, I didn't feel empty. I felt whole. My choices finally matched my values. I no longer needed to explain myself, justify myself, or reshape myself to fit into spaces that diminished me. The feeling was simple and deep. Coherence. I kept being a mother. That never changed. But I stopped being a guarantee. I learned that loving doesn't mean accepting humiliation, that a bond doesn't grant permission to disrespect, that protecting your own legacy isn't selfish. It's responsibility to your own story. I didn't take anything from anyone out of anger. I simply stopped offering everything without limits. What surprised me most was realizing how little around me needed to change for everything inside me to change. The house was the same, the people were the same, but the place I occupied was no longer negotiable. And when that happens, the world either reorganizes or moves away. I don't know when my son understood. Maybe he never fully will, and that's okay. Some lessons don't come through conversation. They come through time, through consequence, through silence. What matters is that I understood. I understood that respect isn't begged for. I understood that dignity has no expiration date. I understood that it's never too late to choose yourself. That Christmas, I lost a comfortable illusion, the idea that accepting everything preserves love. But I gained something far greater, firmness. And firmness changes how you live, how you speak, and how you decide. Today, when I think back to that night, I don't feel anger. I feel calm. The calm of someone who knows they did what needed to be done, even without applause, without recognition, without witnesses. If this story spoke to you, it might not be because of the money. It might be because At some point, you realized you were being placed last and stayed quiet for too long. It's never too late to change that. If you connected with this, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who needs to remember their own worth. And tell me in the comments, what was the moment you realized you needed to choose yourself?